How are you? How was your evening so far? Good stuff?
Yeah, today has been, it was a busy day this morning. I asked my son on our way to school, I asked him what his goals for the day were. He said listening. I said, I wish today was going to be a busy day, and wish granted. So it's been a little hectic.
I hear it's like when it rains, it pours.
Yes,
Things don't fall.
absolutely.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about, I was sharing a little bit of information about you, but I figured I would kind of wait for you to come on and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got interested in doing what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my story is kind of all over the place. I was, I came from kind of a broken household, a lot of issues in my childhood, and then I go off to college, and I meet this guy when I'm 19 years old, and decided that this was the guy that I needed to marry. We kind of jumped first, and even when all the red flags were there, decided to get married anyway, and disregard all the concerns that everyone brought our way. And then it was just a series of 5 years of that classic roller coaster ride that I think a lot of people who have been through divorce or any sort of unhealthy relationship have experienced. Everyone has their ups and their downs. And my son came from that, which is fabulous. So I'd do it all again, because I get him at the end of the day. And yeah, so going from my divorce, I'm now remarried. I have another child, and there was this part of me that felt I had something valuable, that I'd learned something valuable through my journey through that time. And especially as more and more people kept coming to me asking for advice and asking for for some information on what they should do as they started to go through their own divorce or custody battles, or how to navigate their own kind of very tumultuous relationships. And so I found, kind of in a roundabout way, that I had this bit of knowledge that was actually very valuable, that I felt I should share. So I started my blog, Just Micah's Luck, and it's been a really positive experience. There obviously has been some a little bit of an emotional toll on those who are close to the situation, just because it's not a pretty thing. Divorce is never something that is pretty. As even when both parties go at it in a very as healthy as they try to make it, there's always something at it. And mine was not absolutely the worst that it could have been, but it also wasn't all sunshine and daisies every day. So it's definitely been a journey. But yeah, I'm here, and I feel like I have a lot that I can share with what I've learned through the chaos.
And I'm going to go back later to probably ask you about getting a divorce and having a child and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want to talk about that yet in a second. But something that I was thinking of when you were saying that is just how true it is of sharing your journey with others once you've come out on the other side, and to be able to share that, turn that pain around into the lesson, and to be able to help others is just such a beautiful experience to be able to do. Because sometimes people will get stuck in the victim mode and feel badly that they experience that, and that is so disempowering, where instead you can learn and show and grow it. And I found from my personal experience that the more I shared, the more other people were comfortable to share in their experience. And then it just started, it grew from there. Like I didn't even have a choice, which sounds like it was the same thing for you. It was just kind of like, here, this is now your journey. Like, whoa, what do I do?
Yeah. No, this was a genre. I've always been drawn to writing. That's always been something that I've always done, to kind of both as a creative outlet and to kind of cope with whatever was really pressing on me. But this was not the genre I would have picked for myself. It just kind of became what I had the most to work with and what I had the most depth in. And it quickly did become something I was really passionate about talking about not only through my own journey, but in being able to help others.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, because that's what it is. It's that passion, and you know, people talk about what you do for a living and things like that, and I think it's great to really. It's not like I don't feel like I'm working, and it sounds like you don't. It's just kind of like it's what you do.
Yes.
It's just hard, and you're, you know, and that's such a. I wish more people felt that way, because it life would be so much easier if everybody was really doing what they loved.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, one of the best bits that I heard. So, I don't know if you've heard of Julie Solomon,
No.
but she runs a marketing podcast, and in my 9 to 5 job, I'm a marketer, so I found her through that. And one of the things that she talks a lot about is um, finding the thing that others come to you about, like if there is something that others are coming to you about constantly, then that's really what you're naturally good at. And I'm, as she's talking about this, I kind of was a joke at first. I'm like, oh great, I get to start a blog about divorce. And I kind of laughed it off. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, I can start a blog about divorce, and this is actually something I can talk about.
Yeah. And it's really, really needed. So let's talk about it. So so you have 3 tips, and I don't want to take away from what you're going to be talking about, but you have some really great insight to be able to share with other people. And you know, I know from my followers, divorce is, it's possibility, thinking about it, been there, done that. There's a whole bunch of different varieties of
Yeah.
people that have experienced different things and different reasons for the divorce as well.
Yes.
So I think that the information you're going to share is going to be really, really helpful. So what do you got for us?
All right. Well, I do want to start by saying that, like you're saying, or like you said, my experience and my story is in no way the one way to do this. So the tips that I'm taking today, I hope that people will find a tidbit that they can apply to their own lives. But everyone's journey is going to be different. It's all going to happen at a different pace. And the way that one person may find themselves after a divorce is going to be completely different from another person. So in no way am I an expert and a know-all be-all on all things divorce. So I think what's true for a lot of people who have, or who either right now are thinking of divorce, or who are in the middle of it, or who have already had a divorce, maybe they've moved on, or maybe they're living alone, or they've chosen to be single at this point, that the end of the marriage was not the date that the judge wrote finalized divorce decree. It happened at least a year before I even said I was done. So it's something that it's not a rushed decision, and I think that's one of the things that shocks a lot of people, because especially in this day and age, we're all on social media. We live this picture perfect life. I think every now and then Facebook memories will pop up showing literally days before my ex and I separated, me talking about how wonderful he was, and how happy I was to be in this relationship, and all of that was just fake. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Now, that's not to say that there weren't happy days even after I had decided. I through this, I don't mean to completely villainize my ex, because neither one of us were perfect. We were not perfect for each other. And I think we both had a lot of issues on our own that we had to work through on our own before without having any business being with each other. And I think we knew that really early on, and we just chose to ignore it, and it built up over the years. So one of the things that during my separation, so I know every state has kind of different legalities regarding what the divorce process is like. I live in the state of Virginia, and in that state, when you have a child with your spouse, you have to have a separation period of at least 1 calendar year before you are allowed to file for divorce.
Oh, wow.
So it is not I want a divorce, go to the courthouse, boom, bam, done. It's I want a divorce, we have to split apart from each other, separate households for 1 year, and then I can go to the courthouse to start the proceedings. So it's definitely a longer process than I think a lot of people will experience. And then I know in some states, I think North Carolina, it's closer to 2 years of separation. So you know, there's a lot there, and it's really difficult when you're trying to have a different life, when you're trying to establish a life, you know, that's so different from what you are used to, that you know, it's hard when legally you can't. Like, I wasn't legally allowed to remove my ex from my health insurance, so I had to pay for health insurance. I wasn't allowed to legally remove him from my lease because we had signed it together and we were still married, so I wasn't allowed to do that. There were a lot of things, and that you know, created a lot of tension between us as we were trying to figure this out. In addition, and aside from our attempts at early co-parenting. So, you know, there were a lot of things that we had to figure out as we went. So one of the things that I really want to talk about today is learning to be selfish. I think in especially toxic relationships, or in relationships where people have been through abuse in any way, shape, or form, whether that's emotional, verbal, or physical, or even if they grew up in a very toxic environment, like I did, coming from a toxic environment, and then, you know, kind of turning around and creating my own toxic environment, as I think many of us do. I think we have a tendency to get so wrapped up in others that we forget about ourselves. And that's what I found that happened with me. I was so afraid of losing him and of losing this picture perfect world that I'd built for myself very carefully, that I lost myself in the process. And so suddenly removed from that, I was kind of stuck wondering, what now? What do I do now? Now it was all on me. I had not only myself, but I had another human being that I was trying to, you know, to drag along through this process. And that's terrifying, especially if you're not used to making the decisions, especially if you're not used to figuring out how to say no and being very firm in what you want, what you don't want. And so that was kind of the hardest thing for me. Actually, that year was my New Year's resolution, was to be selfish, which sounds completely bonkers because you've been taught from a very young age being selfish is bad. Don't be selfish. Share. Think of others. You know. But I do think that it's healthy to think of yourself. One of the things that I was told a lot, or that repeated a lot through my head when I was going through this, was how important it is to put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. So, you know, you think about if anyone's been on an airplane and they go through that pre-flight safety check, they say, if the air mask dropped down, put on your own air mask before you help others. And I think that's something that I absolutely had to learn, was how to put on my own air mask. And that was totally foreign to me. Yeah.
I love that, by the way, because I'm kind of smiling as you're saying, because I'm like, people that watch have heard me say that so many times. So I just love that just example came up from you, because I think especially as women,
yes,
we taught that what we need is not as important as what others need.
Yes.
So we've been, just as being a female, and then of course, depending on how your upbringing was and what your learning is, you really completely put yourself like way at the back, and you never take care of yourself. And when you start to feel like you want to take care of yourself, you feel that that's wrong. So you don't, your emotions, you don't put anything in the forefront, even though they are important. In fact, the most important things you could possibly do in your life is take care of you.
Yeah.
So, and that self-care is foreign to many of us. So that's a great point to bring up.
Yes. I mean, it really is. It's completely foreign. Like you said, it's something that we're really not taught to do. And you know, I grew up in a very conservative, very traditional household where, you know, my father was the breadwinner. And so he expected the women of the house to take care of everything in a quote unquote woman's domain. So all the household chores, the taking care of the children, that was not to fall on him. You know, all of these things were were a part of me constantly being reinforced that I was less important. I needed to take care of others. I needed to take care of my siblings. I needed to do all these things before I could think about myself. And then, as you keep pushing yourself back and further back, well, suddenly you run out of time to take care of yourself. And then you realize it's been years since you've actually wondered even what you like, what you don't like, because you've said, "Oh, no, I don't really care," or "I'd rather not fight about this," or "I'd rather not start a confrontation because I don't want to do this, because I'd rather just let them do whatever they want." And I think that it's really hard when suddenly you are the one trying to figure out what you do and don't like when you're by yourself. And when it's just you, that's all there is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's scary. That's scary.
Terrifying.
Like, it's that mirror and you're like, oh crap.
Yes.
Like, what do I do now?
Yes, exactly. It's absolutely terrifying. One of the first points I'm going to talk about is kind of how to find your village. And to me, a village, if you think about, there's that phrase that it takes a village to raise a child, and it absolutely does. But I also think it takes a village to make us human. Um, you know, when because it was a sort of because the relationship was so toxic, we had completely isolated ourselves from the outside world over the course of 5 years. I shut off all of my friends, because one way or the other, either he didn't like them or he didn't feel comfortable being around them, or they didn't feel comfortable being around him. And you, even if they don't say that so much, you sense it. You know that it's there, and so you'd rather avoid that tension, and so you just find ways to stay home, or you find ways to suddenly you lost contact with this person. Even friends that I had for years, suddenly I realized I had gone years without even seeing them or saying anything to them. And then suddenly your one person, your partner is gone, and you're left alone. And this is, I think, a divorce is the most terrifying time to realize that you are alone. And so I think I would not, I know, not I think, I know I would not have made it without my village. So that was the first thing that I had to figure out how to find. So, I look up I think the week after my my ex and I decided that we wanted to divorce. And I'm not sure for most people, but I know for us, the day that we said we wanted a divorce was a very calm day, which was kind of weird. There was no really screaming and fighting. We weren't angrily screaming we wanted a divorce. It was just, I looked at him and said, "I'm done." And he looked at me and he said, "Okay." And we thought, we can make this work. This is going to be easy. And then a week later rolls around, and then the true character comes out, and you're like, I have no idea who this person is. I've known them for 5 years, and suddenly they're acting like somebody I've never seen before. And then you realize, okay, wait, now I really need someone in my corner. And so I look up and realize I had two people after the course of 5 years. I had two people that I could even tell that I was going through a divorce. Because again, that social media, that picture perfect world, I had been, spending 5 years or so painting this picture perfect world for myself, and that I was the wife who was entirely devoted. We went to church every single Sunday. We didn't miss a service. We had a child. Life was great. We both had jobs. We just moved into this house. Like, things are going great. Now suddenly I'm supposed to drop this bomb. How do you do that? How do you tell people this is happening? Even that phone call home to say, "Hey, this is happening," was terrifying. And I remember my dad being just kind of in disbelief, like, "What do you mean you're getting a divorce?" And I'm like, "Exactly what I said. Getting a divorce. I don't know how to make this any clearer." So it one of the first things that I had to do was figure out how to really strengthen those connections. Now, when I say I had two people, I tentatively had two people. Um, you know, they were friends, but they were not someone that I at that point really felt that I could call on at any given time. They weren't, you know, the 2 a.m. in the morning friends. They were the I'll see them or I'll send them a text after work or I'll comment on their post on Facebook. Um, and suddenly I had to figure out, okay, well, these are the closest people in my life. How do I strengthen that relationship? How do I how do I make this work? Because I haven't worked on strengthening a relationship in a long time, especially in a friendship like this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I was very lucky in that I had those people to turn to and that those people were very receptive. And they actually, I mean, they're hands down my absolutely best friends. And they have, right now are the people I can call at 2 a.m. because I know that they'll be there. But at that point, you know, I didn't know. I didn't know if they were or not. So definitely find your village. Think of those people are who are going to be the ones you can turn to. You are going to have to lean on them, and that's absolutely necessary. Allow them to help you. I think it was the hard thing for me too, because I am a very self-reliant person to a fault. I will stubbornly refuse help um, because I don't want people to see me failing. Like that is absolutely my hubris. I would rather fall on my face a million times than to see people watch me struggle or than to have people watch me struggle. And I think that's, you know, even even now as I'm remarried, I think it drives my husband crazy about me because I won't even let him help me, especially
Mm-hmm.
not him. I would rather have a stranger help me than I would him, because I think that those that are closest to us are like just stay away. Um, so being able to open yourself up to help is something as well. But on that flip coin, I think there's a slippery slope. So yes, open yourself up to help, but make sure that you're not using your friends as what I like to call an emotional punching bag. You know, they are your friends. They want to help you. They want to walk you through this, but they are not there to be the one for you to turn your own abusive tendencies towards. Especially people who've been through abuse. I think they're we're very quick to, I don't say quick to, but we're so used to abuse that in the lack of it we become the abuser. Um,
Yes.
and I think that's very easy to do with people who are trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
We're, you know, especially when we're not even aware of it. Like when I was first separated from my ex, I had no idea that it was technically an abusive relationship. People told me for years whenever I would go to them with, hey, this is a problem that's going on in our marriage. Like, I don't know how to deal with this. And people would say, you know, that sounds like abuse. That sounds very toxic. You should see a counselor. You should go to marriage counseling. And I would go,
Mm-hmm.
no, 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 you're wrong. You're all wrong. Like, this is not abuse.
Yeah.
This is just
I
a
can
marriage
take
problem.
it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, when especially if you're not even aware that it's abuse, it's very easy to become the
Mm-hmm.
abuser. So be very careful to avoid using your friends as an emotional punching bag. They're there to help you. They're not there to take the brunt of all of your pain. You know, and I think one of the things, if you call your friend at 2 in the morning and they answer, great. Like, let them know what's going on. But if they try to help you, don't flip on them. And I think that's something that's very easy to do because, as I said, even today, if a friend tries to help me, my walls are up. I'm very defensive, just naturally defensive. And I think that's something to be aware of as a quality. So be ready to remove yourself rather than engage in that sort of toxic relationship on those that you need. Be aware that that is something that can occur.
And I just want to add to that, because it's bringing up something that I said to my husband today or yesterday, it doesn't matter when, but I was thinking about how growing up, I remember learning that saying I'm sorry or admitting wrong was like terrible.
Oh yeah.
And for me, I didn't even realize how it like hurt. Like I could feel it in my chest and my stomach and be like, okay, I know I'm wrong and I know this is my fault, but I can't say I'm sorry. Like it was like physically paining me to say it. And the admitting wrong, like, no, I'm not wrong. I could figure this out. Again, like you said, I'm the strong, independent woman. I can figure this out. It's not as bad as everybody else. Or that shame and the guilt that goes along with all of those feelings.
Yes.
And that, I mean, because it makes everything worse to just admit, like, so now with my husband, we're healthy and happy, but like comfort, I'll automatically, I will say sorry more easily, but there's still those times where I'm like, I say it and I'm like, oh, that felt a little weird. And then I feel fine afterwards, but there's still that discomfort of learning for 40 years of learning that saying you're sorry or that you made a mistake means you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Trained in so many of us. And it sounds like it's kind of the same thing for you. It's like, no, I don't need your help because I don't need it, because that makes me feel like I did something wrong.
Yes. And on the flip side of that, actually, it's funny that you bring up apologies, because apologies were a huge part of what I as a part of my process. One, I did have to learn how to apologize, but also I had to learn how to accept an apology. And I think that was really difficult for me as well. So one thing that I teach my son now, since I've learned, and this is something that I think is a really valuable tool for everyone, is how to accept an apology. So think about it. When someone does something wrong, and just think about, if someone bumps into you and knocks you over and you get hurt, what's the first thing they say? Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me help you, right? And 9 times out of 10, what's the response back?
Oh, it's okay.
It's okay, right? But it's not okay because you were hurt, right? So we know that they didn't mean to do that. We know that that apology comes from a genuine place. But by saying it's okay, you were excusing the behavior that led to you getting hurt in the first place. And that's something that is ultimately toxic, not only for you, but also for the person who did the hurt. So one thing that we can do instead is to say, thank you for apologizing. Thank you for owning up to your mistake. And I think that works both ways, and teaching people that it's a good thing to apologize. First of all, thank you. You're receiving that gratitude. You're not being brushed aside. And then also it teaches you that your hurt was acknowledged. It's teaching you that, yes, you were hurt. Someone has tried to help, and now you can work through that and move into forgiveness. You've moved on. It's not it didn't happen. It's not this is an excusable behavior that they can do again. It's I can forgive now. So absolutely, apologies are huge. So speaking of moving on, my second tool after how to find your village is how to process your divorce so that you can move on. And I think that's the part that I was stuck in for a long time. And I think a lot of people bring up a point that, well, through my divorce or through my blog, I'm writing about my divorce, and it is bringing up a lot of emotions naturally, because I'm reliving all these things that I had kind of shoved down for the last year or so of living kind of a picture perfect life. I found someone that I'm very happy with. We have kind of everything kind of going for us, knock on wood. I hope it doesn't, I'm not jinxing myself, which I think is another tendency to constantly always be kind of waiting for the other shoe to fall because everything is going too perfect, and it's been too perfect for too long. But it's one of those things that you do have to go through how to processing your divorce. And I absolutely believe in the stages of grief. So, they say you have the 5 stages. So you have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And of course, they say that you don't always go through all of those at the same time or in that order, or you might spend more time in one spot than you do in another. And that was absolutely true for me. So, when my ex decided, when we decided that we were done, we were both in that happy little denial bliss bubble. This is fine. This is going to be the most amicable divorce ever. We will agree on everything, and we'll just go our separate ways, and we'll be friends forever and ever, like yada yada yada. Well, unfortunately, divorce doesn't really work that way. Um, it it sometimes can, I suppose, but I've really never seen it happen. And that's not to say that it was the worst divorce ever, but it also wasn't fantastic. It had its moments. So you have to work through that period of, no, this is fine, I'm fine, and in some ways I was. So when I said that, my marriage ended a year before I said I was done. And that's true. So when I said I was done, and when he moved out, and I say moved out because it was a little bit more dramatic than that, but when we were no longer living together officially, I felt very calm and collected and very detached. Like, no, I don't really care about this. I was done. And in ways, I think that was it was healthy for me, because I didn't have to do that back and forth that I think a lot of people go through, where they call it quits. And then a week later, they, they have a reunion. And then a week later, they call it quits again. And it's back and forth, and there's fighting and screaming, and everyone's confused. We didn't do that. When we finally said we were done, that was it. But that doesn't mean that I didn't transition through my various stages either. And then I think there are two parts to that first stage. So there's denial and isolation. And as I already said, I was isolated. And then when you find your village, I'm having to open up to all these people that I hadn't really opened up to before. And I'm starting to kind of let them in on all the, not so fun parts of my relationship. And I'm starting to talk about things. And through me talking about things, I'm realizing, hey, that wasn't a healthy marriage, which makes sense if you think about it, because why else would I be going through a divorce? Um, Someone said that no happy marriage ever ended in divorce, and that's absolutely 100% true. Like, that would be a horrific thing if two people who are madly in love with each other, happy with each other, got a divorce, but that's never happened. We were not happy, and that's why we got a divorce. And ultimately, if we weren't happy, there was some thing or some level of toxicity between us that led to us feeling unhappy with one another. So as we start talking about these things, I'm realizing, hey, that was abusive behavior. That was emotional manipulation. That was not okay. That was an outburst. And then that's not only on me, but then I start thinking of all these examples of him with our son. And the more and more that I'm digging through these layers, the worse it's getting. And the more I'm uncovering. And that leads to step 2, which is anger. And boy, was I angry. And I am a very, like, I hate to say, like, I'm a horrible person when I'm angry, but I really am. I will become a very, very just ugly person, and in all manners, and so yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to co-parent with this person that I am convinced, or at this point, and kind of, but was entirely unhealthy. And and then on top of that, we have to go into a courtroom. And for us, we were okay financially. So finances played a huge role in this too. So finances, when they come in, we were okay with merged finances. But then suddenly I was on my own, and I was a teacher. So I was working on a teacher salary. I suddenly had to find childcare all on my own. I suddenly had a house payment all on my own. I had all these bills. He just left. He got to walk away. I didn't. And so I had this extra layer of stress on top of all of that with I'm failing. Like I'm struggling, I'm trying, but I'm failing. I got really lucky in that at the time of our divorce or of our separation, we were very involved in a local church. And so they were there to kind of witness what was happening, and they stepped in because they saw me struggling, and they paid my rent the last month that I was in that house because they knew I couldn't do it. And that was absolutely a blessing that I don't know what I would have done if it weren't for their help. And then when it was time for me to move out, which I had to break the lease to do, which added on to the financial stress because I wasn't getting a down payment back, and I had to move, and I had to put a down payment on this other house, and I had to qualify for all these things. And I was living off of credit cards. I was playing that credit card roulette game of which bill can I put off now? Which bill is absolutely vital? Which, as it turns out, your gas bill, pay that one. Fun fact. But yeah, so it it was a lot of stress, but he got to walk away, and until there was a court order, he was not required to pay anything. And I think a lot of people expect court to go be a fast process. At least I did. I thought I would, because I went, I think, the next day after he left, and I went to the courthouse to file all the necessary documents, and expected, there would be a letter telling him how much to pay, and then like by the end of the month, all these things would be taken care of. Nope. They did send me a letter in 2 weeks telling me to come to court in another 4 weeks. And then I go to court, and then they see me walk in with, all of my 2 binders of documentation. And they say, is this going to take a while? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, postpone for 6 months. So then I'm stuck trying to figure out how to survive for another 6 months, which added to the anger because he got to come in with a lawyer. I was over here struggling. I had to represent myself, and that is terrifying. When it's, okay, how am I going to protect my child and myself against the, a fully trained like a professional lawyer? I see someone ask.
And someone just asked, did you get full custody of your son?
I did. So in the state of Virginia, they talk about custody in 2 ways. They talk about physical custody, and then they talk about legal custody. So physical custody means the child resides with either or both parents. They're 50% or 100% of the time. I did get full physical custody of our son. Legal custody is 50-50. So what that essentially means is that I keep him informed on all things involving our son. I let him know if he's changing schools. I let him know about any medical issues that are coming up. Really kind of keep him in the loop so that it's not kind of keeping him away, which is absolutely fine. When I talk about going in for custody, I don't mean you need to completely isolate your child, and you should absolutely not. And custody is a whole nother ball game that I didn't really plan on getting into, but it is important that while you're going through this, you remember that your issues with your ex are not your child's issues with your ex, that they are absolutely entitled to a relationship with their parent. And unless you have absolute 100% solidified proof that there is going to be some sort of harm involved in allowing that relationship to continue, make sure that you are doing what you can to allow that relationship to take its own natural progression. I'm very careful to try to avoid talking about my ex or my child's father in a negative way where he can hear me. Because to him, his father is just his father. He is just another figure in his life that he looks up to, that he enjoys spending time with. And who am I to try to change that? Because that is not my role. If and when the day comes that, through the natural progression of their own relationship, my son has a different view of his father, then that is his own call. So I'm working through anger, and then the bargaining comes, where I think I might have skipped bargaining and just dived right into depression. And that was me literally staying in bed for 3 or 4 weeks. I was a teacher, so I didn't have to get up in the morning during the summer, which I was very lucky in that right after my first court date where they said, we'll postpone it for 6 months, I was in the middle of summer, so I didn't have to get up. So I didn't. I barely got up to give my kids some food, and then walked right back to bed and got in bed and just kind of binged on TV. It was the saddest part of my journey. And I think that's true for a lot of people. This was not an easy choice. In fact, deciding to go through this was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think that's true for a lot of people. It's as removed as I was from my ex at that point, and as much as I was always very solid in my choice to end the marriage, that doesn't mean that I didn't grieve it. Having a 2-parent household, or having parents who fought, or having parents who lived under separate roofs was not something I had picked for my child. That was not what I said I wanted to do when we were talking about having a child. My son was not by accident. In fact, he was very much a planned child. So to have carefully chosen this person that I wanted to have a child with, to go through all of the steps of trying to get pregnant for 1.5 years, and then suddenly in the midst of my pregnancy was when it all started to fall apart. And then then we have a newborn, and we're trying to deal with having a newborn and all these things that come with a child that just pile stress on. And then by my son's first birthday, we called it quits. It was definitely something that was really difficult mentally to kind of cope with. So not everyone is going to grieve in the same way. For me, it was being in bed, but then it was also trying to counter that at all points by trying to not be isolated, which I think was healthy ultimately for me, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But just because I think if you see someone going through this, or if you yourself are going through this, and your natural instinct is to go out and party, or to go out and do these things that you would otherwise feel very guilty about, or that you may still feel guilty about while doing it, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the wrong thing to do. Everyone kind of grieves differently. Everyone has to go through their own process. So there's no right way to grieve. And that's what this is. As much as you would grieve anyone who died, you are grieving the death of your marriage. And that is absolutely something that it's going to take time. You can't rush it. So you kind of allow yourself some grace in that time. Allow yourself to work through the process and be okay, because some days I would be very depressed, and then the next day I'd be fine. I would get up, smile on my face, like, let's go to the park, let's go do all these things, let's be accomplished, let's clean the house. And then the next day would come and suddenly it's not okay, or something would come crashing down, or I'd get that lovely bill in the mail with the pink sticker on it, saying past due notice, and oh great, don't know how to deal with this. So keep in mind that you don't have to do, quote unquote, the right things, because there are no right things in your own journey to get over and get through your divorce.
And I was just gonna say too, is that it's so important to feel those feelings.
Yes.
Because and like you said, they're not wrong. So just, if you don't feel them, then they're gonna come up at some other point.
Yes.
So, and you don't want to do that again. You want to feel them, you want to learn from them, you want to have the experience of those feelings, no matter what they are, and that roller coaster that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
You want, and like you push, I say all the time, you push into the fear, you push into the pain, and then you feel the pain, you're depressed, and because I went through depression myself, so I understand. It's hard to do anything, but you need to go through all of those feelings
Mm-hmm.
to get to the other side. And then once you do, you can look back and be like, oh, okay, that's what was going on. But you can't cover it up or try to put it off for another time, because it's not going to work out for anybody.
No, absolutely. You have to let yourself go through it. You have to trust the process, because I think,
just don't stay stuck there. Then get help, and don't stay stuck there. But
yes,
feel it as feeling, and then make sure that you have those people, that support team,
yes,
or the village, like you said, to help bring you back up when you're ready for air again.
Absolutely. One of my go-tos, I see she's watching right now, Elise, she came over to my apartment on many a late night to binge watch some Harry Potter, which was my chosen therapy. She'd come over with a bottle of wine at the drop of a hat. If I was saying I need somebody here, she would be there. Even if that meant I was falling asleep by the opening credits, like she was there, and just having her presence, it did a lot for me. And so that's a part of when I say find your village. That's what I mean, is have someone there to get you through those really dark times, because you're gonna need them. They're gonna happen, and you really don't want to be entirely alone when those times come up. Another thing that I want to talk about as a part of processing your divorce. Deadpool was the one where I fell asleep in the opening credits. And I know the opening credits are the best parts. I'm so sorry, everyone. I watched it later and it was great. Establishing boundaries with your ex is absolutely crucial. It is so incredibly easy to fall back into your habits of your relationship. Even if you're in a separate household, it is so easy to slip into those things. All I need to do is talk to you in a certain way, and you feel it kind of come over you like a cloud, and suddenly you're like a robot just doing these things and not recognizing yourself, because when you've had that moment of separation, you've realized what it is that was wrong about it, but then you're doing it again. As a part of trying to allow my son to maintain a relationship, you're kind of forced to interact with your ex, even when you don't really want to, especially when you don't want to, but unfortunately, when you have a child, it's not I get to sign this paper and I never have to see them again. You don't get a clean break. You do have to talk to them on a regular basis, when both sides are feeling hurt, and when both sides are saying these ugly things at one another, or you can kind of read their body language that they're upset or they're angry at you, and there's just so much tension there. So it is so easy to fall into those habits, and you need to establish for yourself a healthy boundary. Absolutely. Like right away, establish them, and then figure out how you're going to maintain them. Find some action verbs to say. When this comes up, I am not going to do that. Instead, I am going to do this. Like, you need to write a list if you need to. That's what I had to do, was say, no, I am not going to let him dictate when I am going to meet with him, or when I am going to do this. Instead, I am going to set a time for myself, and I'm going to stick to that time. I'm not going to allow him to go around that. If you give an inch, they take a mile, that sort of thing. Like, I need to be very firm with him and with myself. And honestly, it was the being firm with myself that was the terrifying part. At this point in our co-parenting journey, it can still be tense at times, but I think, we at this stage have kind of loosened those boundaries just a little bit, because those feelings have had time to kind of settle. But in the beginning stages, those were absolutely necessary, of being very firm. And I don't mean lashing out at your ex. I mean telling them no and then walking away. Be ready to walk away, disengage. Do not engage, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Just say no and then get out, And I think that is something that is very difficult to do when emotions are high for a lot of people, especially in relationships that were previously abusive or controlling. I've had a friend who came to me, who told me that when she and her ex, when they were angry, they were both abusive to each other. There was no one abusive partner, one victim. It was both of them physically abusing one another. And I had to tell her immediately from the get-go, you do not engage. You get out and you walk away. I don't care how angry you are. You leave. I don't care what's in the house. You leave. You get out of that situation. You call somebody if you have to get you as far away as you can. And you do it. You find your exit route and you go. And that's crucial, that you figure out what it is about your relationship that makes you feel uncomfortable. Because there is a relationship even after you say the relationship is over. There's a relationship. It's just a different kind. Figure out what it is about that makes you uncomfortable, and figure out how to navigate around that by yourself. If you need to, which I did over and over again, even when I eventually had to figure it out on my own, I did ask my friends for help in that situation, because I think my view was so muddled. I didn't know what was right and what wasn't. And I was so terrified of being too harsh, which is crazy. I was so afraid of angering my ex that I didn't know how to establish healthy boundaries for myself. I didn't know how to protect myself because I didn't want to make him upset. So I had to ask others who I knew had healthy boundaries and ask them, what would you do in this situation? And that became kind of my guide, that I was able to say, okay, that makes sense. That is healthy. That is the right choice. I can see that now, because before that wasn't even fathomable to me.
And I love that part of the tip, because that's actually one of the things that I brought up with, even when I started dating again. I had a couple friend, and I had said to them, hey, I'm going to be starting to date again. I am going to bring everyone that even is a slightly possibility of a second date, or not a second date, but like slightly possibility of like a more relationship.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring them to you. And whatever you say, if you don't like them, I will listen to you, because I am not good at picking out the right people. So I had like this thing with them where I would listen to whatever they said. So, luckily by the time I got to my husband, I was already actually well enough established in myself. I didn't have to do that anymore. But it's whether you're going through the situation or whether you're on the other side, because that's why, I talk about needing a coach, and like you said, needing your team, and you've got to have the right people that are doing well, that are already there, that you can turn to be like, yo, dude, is this cool? Because I don't know what's cool
Yeah.
anymore. I don't know
Yeah.
if this is okay.
Yeah.
And that's so important in the growth and the change.
Yes, absolutely. You need to find those who you know without a shadow of a doubt are they understand what is and isn't healthy, and what, and really allow them to be your example, be your guide. It's funny that you say that, because my friends, for my husband, I had to have them all meet him and all agree that he was good, that he was okay, before we agreed. And we kind of fast paced it right into marriage, because as soon as they were like, yep, he's a good one, like, boom, we were married. But I needed that. I needed that, the stamp of approval, just because I didn't want to find myself back in the same situation that I just left, which was actually a part of what I wanted to talk about. Is be careful when you jump back into dating, that you do not fall immediately back into a toxic relationship, because it's so easy. That's what you're used to. That's what seems normal. And that's just what we're drawn to. And, if it could even seem like you are looking for the person who is the exact opposite of your ex. You're like, in every way, shape, or form, this is exactly the opposite. And then, 2 months into it, or 2 weeks into it, after your guard is down a little bit, suddenly that ugliness starts to rear its head. And then you're going through the steps again of the roller coaster. And then but now you're kind of like, okay, I recognize it from before, but now this is different. This one's different. And then, and then it kind of builds up on itself. So be absolutely careful when you jump back into dating, that you are avoiding those toxic relationships, and that you have an exit strategy for when they do come out. And I say when, because it is inevitable that you are going to find someone along the way that is going to be a toxic partner, and that you recognize those warnings and those red flags early enough on, that you can just cut it off and walk away.
Yeah. And that's so important, to have that time alone, is to be able to really figure yourself out.
Yes.
and get comfortable in your own skin, so you don't reattract the same person. Let me just say, we have about 5 minutes left, just to give you a heads up. But yes, and I'm not trying to rush you.
No,
but
you're fine.
I know it. Yeah, just to give you a heads up of where we're at.
No, you're fine. Yeah, so it is very important, like you're saying, to give yourself that time. I often say that if I had met my husband earlier than I did, he would not have been the right person for me, and I was absolutely not the right person for him. So I had to go through my process in order to be ready for him, and to be ready for him to be ready for me. And even when we did meet, I was terrified of him, because I knew it was going to be a relationship. I knew it was going to be a serious thing from day one, and that was terrifying. So I think a lot of things that we've talked about already were ones that I wanted to cover, even though we didn't go in my order. We just happened to find them. But one thing that I really had to do was to learn how to step out of my comfort zone. I talked about in my depressive state, hiding in the bed, and then on the flip side of that, forcing myself to get out. And to me, that was the biggest part in my own journey, in my own recovery, was learning how to get out, learning how to not isolate myself. I would give myself the small challenges. So one of the first things I did was go out by myself to a I don't want to say bar, even though like I sat at the bar, because where else do you sit when you're by yourself? I went out by myself with no friends, no plans. Like I had nothing to meet anybody, and that was the most terrifying thing that I didn't know how to do that. In fact, I Googled, how do you go out by yourself? And funny enough, Google will tell you, take a book. And I was reading this, and I thought, this is the dumbest thing ever. I'm not taking a book. And then I sit down and I look over, and the girl sitting next to me has a book. And it made me laugh. And then I asked her if she Googled, and then we became friends just because of that small interaction. And it was that breath of like, you're okay. Like I had some reassurance Like this is okay. You can do this. You can make friends. And it gave me the push that I needed. So, give yourself some small challenges if you need to get out of your bubble. Go out to eat by yourself, talk to a stranger, make a fool of yourself on the dance floor without alcohol. Sign up for a gym class, do something physical, like whatever that you would actually be terrified to do it. Like find a way to do it and then actually do it, follow through. And I think that is going to expand who you are as you're trying to figure yourself out, figure out what you do and don't like, when you're trying to figure out who you are as a person. I think that's absolutely crucial to try to get out and discover yourself.
Yeah, so important, so important. And that's actually in my one of my programs, my online programs. I call that part finding your passions. So yeah. It's going out, getting out of your comfort zone and going to meetup groups, or if you are religious, some of the whatever they have available there, or at your local high school, or at the library, or whatever is your outlets. Just go there and you'll meet other people that are there by themselves too, yeah. And you already know you have something in common, so it's something to talk about.
Yes.
And then you get to like to do and start to do those things.
Yeah. And you might make some of your best friends along the way. Some of my best friends are ones that I met through that time of just trying to figure out who I was. So it's absolutely beautiful. It's, like I said, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I think it's the hardest thing anyone who's ever been through divorce ever has to do. But then you look back and it's kind of amazing that you were able to get through it. And, and then seeing where you are now from where you were then is just incredible. There's no other feeling like it. So if you're in the tunnel, there is a light at the end. Just push through. You'll get there. Just allow it to happen. And then if you're thinking about it, it is going to hurt. I'm so sorry. It is. But if you ask me, was it worth it? Absolutely. Because I'm so happier with who I am now than who I was back then. And I wouldn't, even every painful second, I wouldn't change it.
And the great part of the experience is learning how powerful and strong you are. And
Absolutely.
Those things that you didn't think you could do, the depression where you couldn't get your head off the pillow, all of those things, here you are on the other side, and you were like, wow, I am a warrior woman. Like, look at what I am able to do. And it makes other things scary, where you're like, I've been through some pretty crappy things.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Even the bad parts now, I'm like, that's not too bad.
Exactly. And I really love everything. Everything that you shared, and you really are so genuine. You have such a good energy. Like I'm enjoying watching. You're just like really sweet, kind energy. And so I'd love for people to be able to follow what you do and be able to keep, in your circle of your sphere of influence, if you will. So how can they do that? How can they follow you? What's the name of your blog?
Sure. You can find me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Just Micah's Luck. And then my blog is justmicahsluck.com. I talk not only about my divorce, I talk about my childhood, I talk about my current relationship, I talk about co-parenting, trying to figure out what life is after divorce. And so there is a lot there. And I think even if divorce isn't a part of your story, I think there's something there that a lot of people can relate to.
Oh yeah, and like the toxic parents and all that stuff. I think that for a lot of people that really will speak to them. So that would be great. So anyone who didn't catch that, don't worry, we'll put it in the comments, so you'll be able to find it easily. We don't want you to have to search or wonder about spelling or anything else. It'll be right in the comments, so you won't have to think about it. And definitely give her a follow. And share your thoughts. And if you know anyone who's going through a divorce or is having issues with toxic people in their lives or whatever it is, feel free to share this video with them and let them see it. And you know, we're here to help. I mean, I think that I can say this without asking ahead of time. I mean, it's in our best interest to have everyone else live a happy life. Like,
Oh,
and that's for, you know, us, and, you know, like we want you to be happy. We want you to come out on the other side and be those strong warrior people that we know you can be. So keep pushing, keep feeling that pain, that discomfort. You can get to the other side and life will be amazing. You just have to get there. So you can do it.
yeah.
I know you can. And, you know, like I said, share this with anyone. And any last question or anything before we end up?
No, I don't think so. I think we got it.
All right. All right. Well, it was so much fun getting to talk to you, and everyone else. I will see you next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. I'm trying to think. I'm actually going to be doing a Facebook Live on somebody else's Facebook, so I'll be sharing that with other people. But the week after, we've got some good things coming up, talking about toxic families and the holidays. So that'll be something we're talking about next week. But I will be sharing that with all of you. So again, thank you. Bye, and we'll see you soon. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.